Hello, welcome back to Every Problem. This is Stewart Calculus 8th edition, Chapter 1, Section 1, problem number 50. For this problem, we're told to sketch the graph of the function, and here we're given it says g of x equals the absolute value of x minus 1 and close absolute value brackets, right? So we sort of have this, we have this double absolute value kind of function here. And if it's not so obvious at first to see how this graph is going to look, then we can always just start with a basic table of values and see how it goes from there. So let's go ahead and start with an x and a g of x. And here we have, it looks like, we'll put -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So g of x, let's see, we have absolute value of -2 minus 1, absolute value, right? So that ends up just being 2 minus 1, and that gives us 1, absolute value of 1, which then becomes 1, right? So a lot of absolute values will always have a positive answer because anytime we have absolute value, our answer will always be positive. So -2 ends up turning into 1. -1, well, let's see. It can be a little bit confusing to see with lots of ones and lines from absolute values, but that ends up giving us simply 1 minus 1, which equals 0. So -1 is going to give us 0. And then for the rest of this, maybe let's just do a little bit of mental math. If I were to plug in a 0 here for x, then we would have 0 minus 1, and that would give us a -1. But we need the absolute value of -1, which is going to give us positive 1. So for 0, it'll be 1. Then when we have positive 1, well, that's absolute value of 1 minus 1, and that gives us 0. And last but not least, if we have 2, well, we have absolute value of 2, which is just 2, minus 1, and that equals 1. So what ends up happening is our graph kind of looks like a W. So let me go ahead and draw the axes here. And let's go ahead and get our -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So at -2, we had positive 1. At -1, we had 0. At 0, we had 1, and then at 1 was 0, and at 2 is 1. Is 1. Now, just to make sure we have the direction correct, what would happen if we plugged in 3? Well, 3, we would just have, instead of this 2 minus 1 here, right, we would plug in 3 for absolute value of x, and we get 3 minus 1 equals 2. Okay, so what we see is this function, it sort of wiggles a little bit, and that's why it has this W shape. Maybe I'll do this in yellow so it's a little bit easier to see. And then it just goes off in each direction this way. And so the reason for this little deviation here is because of the -1 in our function. That's why that looks a little bit different from just your standard absolute value function. And anyways, that is how we do problem 50, and that's going to be our sketched graph of the function.